At 11:47 p.m., Derek's hands found my shoulders. I thought he was steadying me against the waves. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to realize they were counting on that trust to destroy you? Because that's exactly what happened to me on a family cruise that was supposed to help me heal from losing my husband 6 months earlier. What happens when the person planning your funeral is standing right behind you? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. Because what Derek didn't know was that I'd been a hospice nurse for 40 years, and I know exactly how long someone can survive in water. The deck was slippery from ocean spray. Fort Lauderdale's lights twinkled behind us as our yacht cut through calm waters. Emma, my daughter, had gone below deck an hour earlier, claiming seasickness. Derek suggested we get some air together. Father-daughter bonding, he called it, which should have been my first red flag since he wasn't my father. Beautiful night, Marla, Derek said, handing me a glass of champagne. Perfect for new beginnings. I smiled, thinking he meant healing from grief. The ocean breeze felt good on my face. At 67, I'd spent too many nights indoors since my husband died. This cruise was Emma's idea, time to reconnect as a family. Derek moved behind me, pointing at something in the distance. See that light? That's where we'll dock tomorrow. His hands settled on my shoulders. Gentle at first. Steadying. Then the pressure changed. One moment I was admiring the view. The next, I was airborne, salt water rushing up to meet me. The shock of cold ocean hit like a slap. My lungs seized. For 3 seconds, I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't understand why the deck lights were getting smaller. Then my nurse training kicked in. Stay calm. Conserve energy. Float, don't fight. Above me, Derek's voice carried across the water, help. She fell. Man overboard. But I could hear something else in his tone. Relief. I grabbed for anything floating. My hand found a piece of deck panel, probably torn loose during the day's rough weather. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep my head above water. Derek's voice grew fainter as the yacht's engine started up. They were searching, he claimed, sweeping the area with spotlights. But the lights never came close to where I actually was. It was like they were searching in the wrong place on purpose. The water was surprisingly warm for October. My hospice experience had taught me hypothermia timelines. In 75-degree water, I could survive 12 hours if I stayed calm. Maybe longer. I floated and waited. Every few minutes, I'd hear the yacht engines in the distance. Sometimes close, sometimes far. Always missing me by hundreds of yards. Then the sound stopped completely. Around 3 a.m., exhaustion started setting in. My arms ached from gripping the panel. My legs felt heavy. But something kept me alert, the sound of different engines. Rougher. Closer. A fishing boat emerged from the darkness. Cuban flags hung from the cabin. Rough hands pulled me from the water onto a deck that smelled like diesel and fish. They spoke rapid Spanish. I whispered "gracias" and passed out. When I woke up, sunlight streamed through a small cabin window. An older fisherman offered me coffee and dry clothes. Through broken Spanish and hand gestures, I tried to explain what happened. They thought I was confused from trauma. But I wasn't confused. I was calculating. Derek had tried to kill me. He'd planned it carefully, wrong search coordinates, perfectly timed distress calls, Emma conveniently below deck during that accident. The question wasn't whether he'd done it. The question was how long he'd been planning it. If someone you trusted pushed you off a boat, would you survive the first hour? Subscribe. Because Marla's survival tricks might save your life someday. 11 hours later, rough hands pulled me onto a boat that smelled like diesel and fish. They spoke Spanish. I spoke about survival. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to save themselves when the people they love most want them gone, this story will shake you to your core. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were counting on that trust to destroy you? What happens when your own family plans your funeral while you're still breathing? Follow along as we uncover how a 67-year-old widow turned the tables on the family members who tried to erase her, and why her quiet revenge became a masterclass in patience and justice. Thanks for watching. If Marla's fight for survival inspires you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when their backs are against the wall. Comment, trust and 01 if you saw this betrayal coming. The Cuban fisherman thought I was already dead. My lips were blue, my words came out as whispers. Captain Rodriguez, at least that's what I think his name was, kept pointing at my wedding ring and saying, esposo. Husband. I shook my head and made a cutting motion across my throat. Dead. He understood that part. They wrapped me in blankets that smelled like salt and motor oil. The boat was small, maybe 30 feet, loaded with nets and ice chests full of red snapper. These weren't pleasure fishermen, they were working men who'd been out all night. I tried to explain I needed to contact U.S. authorities. Police. Coast Guard. Embassy. But my Spanish was limited to hola and gracias, and their English was worse. They kept nodding and offering me more coffee, treating me like a confused grandmother who'd wandered away from a nursing home. Time was everything. Every hour Derek's story became more believable. Every hour my survival became harder to explain. The fishermen were kind but suspicious. Finding an American woman floating alone at night probably seemed impossible. They kept checking my pulse, like they expected me to stop breathing and prove this was all a hallucination. Around noon, we reached a small coastal town I couldn't pronounce. Concrete buildings, rusty boats, pelicans everywhere. Captain Rodriguez led me to what looked like a police station, really just a concrete room with 2 desks and a fan that didn't work. The officer spoke better English. Senora, you say boat accident? I nodded. My family thinks I'm dead. I need to call the American embassy. He frowned. Family on boat, they no look for you? That's when it hit me. Derek had called off the search. He'd reported me dead without finding a body. In his mind, I was already gone, fish food somewhere in the Gulf Stream. The officer made some calls. Within 2 hours, I was in a jeep heading toward Havana, still wearing borrowed fishing clothes and smelling like bait. But during that bumpy ride, something crystallized in my mind. Derek had pushed me overboard expecting me to die quietly. He'd probably already started making funeral arrangements. Probably already started accessing my bank accounts. He wanted me erased. Forgotten. Buried at sea without a trace. Ever been rescued but felt more trapped than before? The embassy building in Havana was air-conditioned and official. Clean white walls, American flags, people in suits who spoke my language. But when I walked up to the desk and said, I need help, my family thinks I'm dead, the clerk's face went pale. She typed something into her computer. Typed some more. Then looked up at me like she'd seen a ghost. Through broken Spanish and hand gestures, I finally made them understand one word, police. But by then, I'd been missing for 18 hours. The U.S. Coast Guard told me I was dead. Officially. Filed that morning. The embassy clerk handed me a printed email like she was passing me my own obituary. Ma'am, according to this report, you were declared missing at 11:52 p.m. yesterday. Search called off at 6:15 a.m. today due to weather conditions. Weather conditions? The ocean had been calm all night. There's more, she said softly. A death certificate was filed in Fulton County, Georgia this morning. Your son-in-law listed himself as the reporting party. My hand started shaking. Derek had filed my death certificate before the Coast Guard even stopped looking for me. That's not grief, that's efficiency. The timeline was impossible unless Derek knew exactly when to start the paperwork. He'd called me dead at 11:52 p.m., 3 minutes after I hit the water. 3 minutes. I was still fighting waves while he was already on the phone reporting my death. Ma'am, There's something else, the clerk continued. The Coast Guard report shows your family's yacht returned to Port Everglades at 2:30 a.m. But the search continued until 6:15 a.m. Derek had gone home to bed while pretending to help look for me. I asked to see the Coast Guard report. The clerk hesitated, then slid it across her desk. Derek's statement was 3 paragraphs of perfect brief. He described how I'd been struggling emotionally since my husband's death. How I'd been unsteady on my feet lately. How he tried to grab me but couldn't reach in time. Every word was calculated. Every detail built a case for accidental death caused by an elderly woman's poor judgment. But Derek had made one crucial mistake. The report listed our coordinates when I fell overboard. I'd been watching those same coordinates on the yacht's GPS screen just minutes before Derek pushed me. We'd been anchored there for over an hour, having dinner on deck. Except the Coast Guard searched 12 miles south of that position. They declared her dead in under 24 hours. That's not grief, that's preparation. Subscribe to see how she proves premeditation. I borrowed the embassy phone and called information for Frank Morrison's number. Frank was a retired insurance investigator who'd helped me when my husband's life insurance company tried to deny his claim last year. If anyone would believe this story, it would be Frank. Frank, it's Marla Chen. I need your help. Marla? Thank God. Emma called me yesterday crying, said you drowned on a family cruise. I was about to send flowers. Frank, listen carefully. I'm alive. I'm in Cuba. And Derek tried to murder me. Silence on the line. Then, Marla, where exactly are you right now? I explained about the Cuban fishermen, the embassy, the timeline problems. Frank listened without interrupting, the way good investigators do. Marla, don't call anyone else. Don't post on social media. Don't contact Emma yet. Get back to the States as quietly as possible. If Derek thinks you're dead, we can use that. Use it how? Dead people can't interfere with probate proceedings. If Derek's moving fast on your estate, he's about to leave evidence everywhere. The embassy clerk handed me a copy of my own death certificate. Time of death, 11:55 p.m. Derek called it in at 11:52 p.m., 3 minutes after I hit the water. Derek called it in while Marla was still fighting for her life. Drop a alarm clock if that timing feels suspicious. My key still worked. The house was silent, but not empty, it had been searched. For days after Derek pushed me off that boat, I stood in my own front hallway like a stranger. Everything looked normal at first glance. Same furniture, same family photos on the mantel, same throw pillows Emma had arranged last Christmas. But a hospice nurse learns to notice small changes in familiar environments. Things weren't where I'd left them. The mail pile on the kitchen counter was gone. My filing cabinet drawers were slightly open, I always closed them completely. The photo albums from the living room bookshelf had been moved to different shelves, like someone had been looking behind them. In the kitchen, my coffee mug sat in the exact center of the counter. I never put it there. I always left it by the sink. Someone had been living in my space, going through my things, preparing. I checked my bedroom first. The jewelry box was empty, not robbed, just carefully cleared out. My important papers folder was missing from the nightstand drawer. Even my checkbook was gone. Then I found the real estate contract on the kitchen table. Estate sale preparation was typed across the top in bold letters. The listing date was tomorrow, 5 days after my supposed death. The asking price was $847,000, which was exactly what the house had been appraised for last spring. Derek had done his homework. But he'd also made a mistake. The contract was signed by Emma as sole surviving heir. Except my will named 3 beneficiaries. Emma, the local hospice foundation, and my nephew in California. Derek couldn't have legally processed a sole heir claim this quickly unless he'd prepared documents in advance. I photographed everything with my old flip phone, the contract, the empty jewelry box, the disturbed filing cabinet. Evidence that someone had been planning this long before that cruise. My landline answering machine was blinking. 17 messages. The first 3 were from Emma, crying about funeral arrangements. Messages 4 through 8 were from Derek, his voice getting more confident with each call. By message 12, he was talking to realtors about moving quickly on the property. Message 17 was different. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. Mrs. Chen, this is Jenny Martinez from Precision Tax Services. I saw the obituary in the paper, but something doesn't seem right about the probate filing. Could you, or your family, please call me back? Jenny Martinez. The young woman who'd done my taxes for 3 years. The only person outside my family who knew the details of my financial situation. Would you go to the police now, or gather evidence first? In the kitchen, I found a real estate contract. Listing date, tomorrow. Ever had your own money held hostage by paperwork? The banker's face went white when I handed him my ID. Ma'am, according to our records, you died 4 days ago. Vermont National Bank had been my financial home for 15 years. Same branch, same people, same routine of depositing my nursing pension every month. But now I was sitting across from Tom Bradley, a man who'd helped me open my Christmas Club account last year, and he was staring at me like I was a ghost. Tom, I'm clearly not dead, I said, sliding my driver's license across his desk. I need to access my accounts. He typed something into his computer. Typed more. His face got paler. Mrs. Chen, I have documentation that you were declared deceased on October 15th. Your daughter filed the death certificate Monday morning. She's already claimed beneficiary status on your joint savings account. My heart dropped. Emma had access to our joint account, the one we'd opened when my husband got sick, just for emergencies. There was $47,000 in that account last week. How much did she withdraw, Tom? He looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, the account was closed Tuesday morning. Full withdrawal. $47,000. Gone in 1 day. What about my other accounts? My pension account? The money market? More typing. More bad news. Those accounts have been frozen pending probate proceedings. Your son-in-law filed paperwork claiming he's the estate executor. He presented a will naming him as primary beneficiary. That was impossible. My will named Emma, the Hospice Foundation, and my nephew equally. Derek wasn't mentioned anywhere in my actual will. Tom, I need to see that will. Ma'am, I can't share estate documents with, well, legally speaking, you don't exist right now. I leaned forward. Tom, look at me. I'm sitting right here. I'm breathing. I drove myself to this bank in my own car. How exactly do I not exist? He shifted in his chair. The state of Georgia has legal jurisdiction over the death certificate. Until that's reversed, our hands are tied. But... He lowered his voice and looked around the bank. But there's something else. Your son-in-law came in Wednesday with power of attorney documents. He cleaned out your safe deposit box. Took everything, insurance policies, property deeds, even your jewelry. My grandmother's engagement ring. My husband's military service medals. 40 years of important papers. All gone. They stole her life savings before her body was cold. Or so they thought. Subscribe, Marla's about to become their worst nightmare. Tom, I need copies of every transaction Derek and Emma made this week. Every withdrawal, every document they filed, every signature they provided. He shook his head. Mrs. Chen, I could lose my job. Tom, they committed bank fraud using forged death certificates. You could lose more than your job if you don't help me prove it. He thought for a moment, then turned his computer screen toward me. I can't print anything officially. But I can't stop you from taking notes while you sit here. Smart man. For the next hour, I wrote down every transaction, every timestamp, every signature verification code. Derek had been busy. Life insurance claim filed Tuesday. Property transfer documents submitted Wednesday. Safe deposit box cleared Thursday morning. He'd moved through my entire financial life in 72 hours. The banker leaned forward and whispered, "Ma'am, legally speaking, you're standing in front of me, but you don't exist. Ever had your own money held hostage by paperwork?" Frank Morrison had spent 30 years catching insurance fraud. He'd never seen a victim walk into his office. I found Frank's business card in my wallet, soggy but readable. Morrison Investigative Services, specializing in maritime insurance fraud. He'd helped me fight my husband's life insurance claim last year when the company tried to deny coverage over a pre-existing condition that never existed. His office was exactly what you'd expect: cluttered desk, coffee-stained papers, photos of boats and courtrooms covering the walls. Frank himself was thin, gray-haired, wearing reading glasses that hung around his neck on a chain. "Marla Chen," he said slowly, like he was testing whether my name was real. "Emma called me Tuesday, crying. Said you drowned on Derek's yacht." "I didn't drown, Frank. Derek pushed me." Frank had investigated hundreds of suspicious drowning claims. Boats where the victim's body was never found. Families who moved quickly to collect insurance money. Accidents that happened at convenient times with convenient witnesses. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "Start with why Derek wanted you dead." I explained about the cruise, the push, the Cuban fisherman, the embassy discovery. Frank took notes without commenting, occasionally asking for specific times or locations. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me for a long moment. "Marla, attempted murder is hard to prove without witnesses. But insurance fraud, that's my specialty. And your son-in-law just filed a $250,000 life insurance claim." $250,000. I'd forgotten about the policy Derek had convinced me to buy last spring. He'd said it was smart financial planning for someone my age. Said Emma would need security if something happened to me. Now I understood why he'd been so helpful with the paperwork. "Frank, what do we need to prove fraud?" "Timeline inconsistencies. Documentation errors. Evidence of premeditation." He pulled up something on his computer. "And you just gave me all three." Frank explained how legitimate accident reports differ from staged ones. Real accidents have confusion, contradictory witness statements, delayed reporting. Derek's report was too clean, too detailed, filed too quickly. "Professional criminals make professional mistakes," Frank said. "They over-prepare. Real accidents are messy. This one reads like a script." He pulled up maritime databases, Coast Guard filing systems, insurance claim tracking websites. "Here's what we're going to do," Frank said. "You stay dead. Officially. Don't contact Emma, don't call Derek, don't post anything online. Let them think they won." "Why?" "Because dead people can't interfere with probate proceedings. If Derek's moving this fast, he's going to make mistakes. Big ones. And when he does, we'll have evidence he can't explain away." Frank pulled up yacht registration databases on his computer. Every boat in U.S. waters has mandatory GPS tracking. Emergency beacons. Backup systems. His fingers moved across the keyboard like a concert pianist. Frank pulled up maritime records on his laptop. "Mrs. Chen, this yacht never sent a distress signal. Not once." Frank's face just changed everything. "What do you think he found?" The yacht's backup GPS told a different story. Derek turned off the main system, but forgot about the emergency beacon. Frank's computer screen filled with data points, coordinates, timestamps, a digital map of Derek's lies. Modern yachts don't just disappear. They leave electronic footprints everywhere they go. "Look at this," Frank said, pointing to a line of GPS coordinates. "Derek reported you fell overboard here." He clicked to another screen. "But the yacht's backup beacon shows you were actually here, 3 miles northwest." 3 miles. Derek had lied about our location when he called the Coast Guard. That's why their search boats never came close to where I was floating. It gets worse, Frank continued. The emergency beacon data shows the yacht's engine patterns that night. Normal cruising speed until 11:43 p.m., then stopped completely for 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Enough time to push someone overboard, clean up evidence, and prepare for the performance. Then the engines restart at 11:57 p.m., but look at this pattern. The screen showed the yacht's path after my supposed accident. Instead of circling the area searching for me, Derek had headed straight back toward shore. For 20 minutes. Then the boat suddenly turned around and went back out to sea. Frank, what does that mean? It means Derek went home first. Probably to establish an alibi, make some calls, maybe grab something he needed. Then he went back out to create the search pattern for the Coast Guard. Digital evidence doesn't lie, but people do. Subscribe to see how technology catches killers. Frank pulled up more data. Cell tower records showed Derek's phone had been active during the entire search operation. He'd made 7 calls between midnight and 2 a.m., while supposedly coordinating rescue efforts. Who was he calling at midnight during a search for his missing mother-in-law? That's what we need to find out. Frank opened another database. Maritime law requires all vessels over 30 feet to maintain continuous emergency beacon signals. Derek's yacht transmitted location data every 30 seconds all night long. The data painted a clear picture. Derek's yacht had made 2 separate trips that night. The first trip ended with me in the water and Derek racing back to shore. The second trip was slower, more deliberate, probably creating fake search patterns for the official record. Frank, this proves Derek knew exactly where I was when he called the Coast Guard. It proves more than that. Look at these timestamps. Derek had called the Coast Guard at 11:52 p.m. reporting me missing from coordinates he'd never been to. The yacht's actual position at that time was 3 miles away, heading towards shore at maximum speed. He called in a fake location before he even started his fake search. Frank printed everything: GPS coordinates, engine patterns, cell tower data, emergency beacon logs. Page after page of digital evidence that Derek couldn't explain away. Marla, your son-in-law thinks he committed the perfect crime. But he left a digital trail that looks like a highway. The beacon data showed 2 trips that night. Derek went back out after reporting me dead. 2 trips equals premeditation. React with police car light if you're seeing the setup. But Frank's next discovery made my blood run cold. Marla, there's something else. The yacht's backup cameras were recording all night. Jenny Martinez had done my taxes for 3 years. When she saw the death certificate, she knew something was wrong. Jenny worked for Precision Tax Services downtown, one of those small offices that specialized in helping elderly clients manage their paperwork. She was maybe 25, smart as a whip, and had caught more accounting errors in my files than my previous tax preparer had missed in a decade. When I called her from my kitchen landline, she answered on the first ring. Mrs. Chen? Oh my God, I've been trying to reach your family all week. There's something wrong with the probate documents Derek filed in Georgia. My hands tightened around the phone. What kind of wrong, Jenny? The timeline doesn't make sense. Georgia courts don't process estate claims that quickly unless there's an emergency petition. But emergency petitions require specific medical documentation or proof of immediate financial hardship. Jenny had pulled Derek's filing from public records. 3 pages of legal forms that should have taken weeks to process had been approved in 2 days. Mrs. Chen, can you come to my office? There's something you need to see. 20 minutes later, I sat in Jenny's small office while she spread documents across her desk like a detective laying out evidence. Tax returns, property assessments, probate filings, death certificates. Look at these dates, Jenny said, pointing to different papers. Your will was amended on October 10th, 5 days before the cruise. The amendment gives Derek power over your Vermont property. 5 days before Derek pushed me overboard, he'd legally positioned himself to inherit my house. But here's the problem, Jenny continued. Vermont law requires will amendments to be witnessed by two people who aren't beneficiaries. The witnesses listed here are Harold Kim and Patricia Wong. I'd never heard those names in my life. Jenny, I didn't amend my will. I've never met Harold Kim or Patricia Wong. She nodded. I know. I checked the witness addresses. Harold Kim lives in Atlanta, that's Derek's hometown. Patricia Wong works at a law firm in Georgia that specializes in estate planning. Derek hadn't just planned my murder. He'd built a complete legal framework to steal my estate. Fake witnesses, backdated amendments, out-of-state filing to avoid Vermont's stricter probate requirements. There's more, Jenny said. The will amendment required your signature to be notarized. But the notary stamp is from a Georgia office. You live in Vermont. When did I supposedly travel to Georgia to sign estate documents with witnesses I'd never met at a notary office I'd never visited? According to these documents, you signed this amendment at 3:15 p.m. on October 10 in Decatur, Georgia. But I have your tax appointment receipt from that same day at 2:30 p.m. here in Vermont. I couldn't have been in two states simultaneously. Jenny's hands shook as she gathered the papers. Mrs. Chen, this isn't just fraud. This is conspiracy. Your son-in-law has been planning this for months. Flag those witness names. You'll see them again. Jenny Martinez just proved Derek's been planning this since October 10. How many other families has he done this to? The handwriting expert took one look and said, whoever signed this was right-handed. Your daughter is left-handed. Dr. Patricia Wells ran the forensic document analysis lab at the University of Vermont. Jenny had convinced her to examine Derek's paperwork as a favor, and what she found was damning. Mrs. Chen, bring me something you know your daughter actually signed. I pulled out last year's Christmas card from my purse. Emma always signed our family cards with her distinctive left-handed slant. Dr. Wells placed it next to the probate documents under her magnifying equipment. See this? She pointed to Emma's signature on the Christmas card. Left-handed writers angle their letters differently. They pull the pen rather than push it. Create specific pressure patterns. Then she showed me Emma's signature on Derek's documents. This signature was made by someone pushing the pen. Right-handed technique. Whoever wrote this practiced your daughter's name but couldn't replicate her natural hand movement. Derek had forged Emma's signature on the witness documents. My own daughter had no idea her name was being used to steal my estate. There's something else, Dr. Wells continued. These documents were signed with the same pen. Same ink composition, same pressure patterns. One person signed all these names, Harold Kim, Patricia Wong, and Emma Chen. Derek had played every role in his own fraud scheme. But the most shocking discovery was still coming. Mrs. Chen, look at this power of attorney document. Dr. Wells pointed to a signature I recognized immediately, my own. This is actually your real signature. Recent, too. Probably within the last 6 months. I stared at my own handwriting. When had I given Derek power of attorney? I'd never signed anything like that. Then I remembered. The insurance forms, I whispered. Last spring, Derek had helped me file paperwork for the life insurance policy. He'd brought a stack of forms to my house, explaining each one carefully. Property assessments, beneficiary designations, medical authorizations. I'd trusted him completely. Signed everything he put in front of me. He buried the power of attorney in insurance paperwork, I told Dr. Wells. I signed it thinking it was a beneficiary form. Classic fraud technique, she replied. Hide important documents in stacks of routine paperwork. Victims sign without reading every page. Derek had been planning this since spring. The insurance policy, the power of attorney, the will amendment, even the cruise, everything had been calculated to give him legal control over my estate after my convenient death. Dr. Wells printed her analysis report. Mrs. Chen, this evidence proves systematic fraud spanning 6 months. Your son-in-law didn't just try to kill you, He built an entire legal structure to steal your estate. The expert looked up from his magnifying glass. Ma'am, your son-in-law has been planning this for months. Derek forged his own wife's signature. What kind of man does that? But there was one more shock waiting. Dr. Wells, if Derek forged Emma's signature, how did he get the documents notarized? She smiled grimly. That's the beautiful part. He didn't. The notary stamps are fake too. Emma collapsed when she saw me. Not from shock, from guilt. I'd driven to Emma's house after leaving Dr. Wells' lab. The same two-story colonial where I'd watched my grandchildren take their first steps. Where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays. Where Derek had convinced my daughter that her mother was better off dead. Emma opened the door wearing pajamas at 2 p.m., her eyes red from crying. When she saw me standing on her porch, she dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the brick steps. Mom? Her voice was barely a whisper. Hello, sweetheart. She fell to her knees right there on the porch, sobbing. Not the relieved tears of someone whose mother had returned from the dead. The guilty tears of someone whose secrets had just walked up to her front door. I helped her inside and made us both tea, in her own kitchen, using her own mugs, like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Emma, we need to talk. She couldn't look at me. Kept staring at her hands, picking at her nail polish. Finally, she spoke. Mom, Derek said you were sick. Really sick. He showed me medical records, brain scans, doctor reports. Said you had maybe 6 months left. What kind of medical records, sweetheart? Dementia. Early stage, but progressing fast. Derek said you'd been hiding it from me, trying to protect me. He said you were making dangerous decisions, driving at night, leaving the stove on, getting confused about money. None of that was true. I'd had a complete physical 3 months ago. My doctor said I was healthier than most people 20 years younger. Emma, did you ever talk to my doctor directly? She shook her head. Derek said it would upset you. Said you'd made him promise to handle the medical stuff privately. Derek had isolated Emma from me, fed her false information, positioned himself as my medical advocate. Classic manipulation. Mom, he said you were going to hurt yourself. Or hurt someone else. He said the cruise was a chance to spend good time together before you got worse. And you believed him? Emma's face crumpled. He's my husband. He's been good to our family. Why would he lie about something like that? Because he wanted my house. My money. My life insurance. Everything I'd worked 40 years to build. Emma, Derek tried to kill me. He pushed me off the boat intentionally. No. She stood up, pacing around her kitchen. No, that's impossible. Derek loves you. He's always talking about how much he respects you, how grateful he is for everything you've done for our family. Derek turned wife against mother with lies. Family manipulation runs deeper than you think. Subscribe for the psychology behind betrayal. I pulled out Dr. Wells' handwriting analysis report and placed it on Emma's kitchen table. Emma, look at this. Derek forged your signature on legal documents. You never witnessed my will amendment because there was no will amendment. Derek created fake paperwork to steal my estate. She read the report twice. Her hand started shaking. Mom, if Derek was lying about the medical records, what else was he lying about? Everything, sweetheart. The cruise, the accident, the probate filing. Derek has been planning to kill me since spring. Emma sank into her chair. The insurance papers. Last month, Derek said you wanted to increase your life insurance. Said you'd asked him to handle the paperwork because you were having trouble concentrating. I'd never asked Derek to handle anything. Emma whispered through tears, Mom, he showed me medical records. Said you had 6 months left. Emma was a victim too. Team Marla or Team Emma? Comments below. Jenny's call came while I was making coffee. Marla, we found something big. Derek filed medical papers saying you had dementia. My hands shook as she read the documents over the phone. According to these papers, I'd been diagnosed with severe cognitive decline 3 months before the cruise. The signature was mine, but I'd never seen these forms in my life. He forged a neurologist's report from Tampa General, Jenny explained. Claims you were confused, unable to handle finances, needed a guardian. The timing was perfect for his plan. If I had dementia, any will changes would seem suspicious later. But if he became my legal guardian first, he could control everything legally. I drove to Tampa General myself. The neurologist's office had no record of me ever being there. The doctor whose name was on my evaluation had retired 2 years ago. Derek had gotten sloppy with his research. But here's what really made my blood boil. He'd used my Medicare number to create false billing records. Not only was he trying to steal my inheritance, he was committing federal insurance fraud using my medical identity. The fake medical records show a pattern, Jenny said when I called her back. He needed to establish mental incompetence before the cruise. That way, if anyone questioned the will changes later, he could say you weren't thinking clearly. Have you ever felt like someone was rewriting your entire life story without your permission? Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts on medical identity theft. The Tampa General security footage showed Derek visiting the medical records department twice in July. He'd somehow gotten copies of my real medical files, probably through Emma's employee access at the Vermont clinic where she worked part-time. Frank Morrison called it medical gaslighting. Create a false narrative of mental decline, use it to justify taking control, then eliminate the person before anyone questions the story. We need to contact Medicare fraud investigators, Frank said. This isn't just family drama anymore. It's federal crime territory. I hung up and stared at those forged papers again. Every signature looked exactly like mine, but slightly shaky, as if Derek had traced my real signatures while making them appear unsteady. Even his forgeries were designed to make me look incompetent. That night, I couldn't sleep. Derek hadn't just tried to rob me. He'd tried to erase my mental dignity first, making everyone believe I was a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own decisions. Tomorrow, Frank would file the Medicare fraud complaint. But tonight, I sat in my kitchen reading those fake medical reports, realizing Derek had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The question that kept me awake wasn't how he'd forged the papers. It was how long he'd been watching me, studying me, preparing to make me disappear. 3 weeks after I'd officially risen from the dead, Derek and Emma came to finalize the estate sale. They expected to find buyers, real estate agents, maybe a property management company cleaning out the last furniture. Instead, they found me sitting at my own kitchen table, drinking coffee from my favorite mug. Emma saw me first through the window. I watched her face go from confusion to terror to complete shock. She grabbed Derek's arm so hard he dropped his briefcase. They stood on my front porch for 5 full minutes, Derek checking his phone like he was making sure they had the right house. Emma kept pointing at me through the glass, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. Finally, Derek opened the door with the key they'd never bothered to return. "Hello, Derek," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Emma collapsed into the chair across from me, staring like I was a ghost. Which, technically, I was supposed to be. Derek just stood in the doorway, briefcase in one hand, car keys in the other, calculating his next move. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. "How?" he finally asked. I folded my newspaper and placed it next to a thick manila folder. "How what, Derek? How did I survive 11 hours in the Atlantic? How did I make it back from Cuba? Or how did I find out about the $47,000 you stole while I was fighting for my life?" Emma started crying. Real tears this time, not the fake ones she'd used for the Coast Guard interviews. "Mom, we thought. You thought I was dead," I said calmly. "Because Derek pushed me overboard and told you it was an accident." Derek's face went red. "That's impossible. You fell. Emma saw you fall." Emma saw what you told her she saw. I opened the manila folder and pulled out the GPS printouts. But technology doesn't lie, does it, Derek? The yacht's backup navigation system had recorded everything. 2 trips to the same coordinates. Derek's phone GPS showing him alone on deck at 11:47 p.m. Emma's phone safely in the cabin, probably sleeping. The Coast Guard searched the wrong area, I continued. Funny how that happened. Almost like someone gave them coordinates that were 15 miles off from where you actually pushed me. Have you ever watched someone's entire plan fall apart in real time? The facial expressions alone are worth studying. Derek sat down hard, his confident mask slipping. We can work this out, Marla. Family shouldn't involve lawyers. Family doesn't try to drown each other either. I pulled out the medical fraud documents. But you didn't stop with ATT.
Emma's crying got louder. I didn't know about any medical stuff, I swear. Derek said you'd sign new papers because you were worried about estate taxes. Your husband has been planning this since last spring, Emma. Bank statements show him researching offshore accounts in March. He opened a Cayman Islands trust in April. Bought the yacht in May. And that will amendment? He forged your signature too. Derek stood up fast, his chair falling backward. You can't prove any of this. I smiled and tapped the folder. Derek, I spent 40 years documenting medical care. I know how to keep records. The folder contained everything. Bank records, GPS data, handwriting analysis, Medicare fraud evidence, probate court filings, even photos of Derek visiting Tampa General to steal my medical files. The district attorney received copies yesterday, I said. Along with the federal insurance fraud investigators. And the IRS, since you forgot to declare that Cayman Islands account on your taxes. Emma looked between us like she was watching a tennis match, finally understanding that her mother wasn't the confused old woman Derek had convinced her I was. Derek grabbed his briefcase. This conversation is over. You're right, I said, standing up. Our family relationship is over. But the legal proceedings? Those are just beginning. He headed for the door, but I called after him. Derek? Next time you try to murder someone, don't use a GPS-enabled yacht. Technology remembers everything you thought you erased. The door slammed so hard it rattled my coffee mug. Emma stayed behind, crying into her hands. Time for the hardest conversation of all. After Derek stormed out, Emma and I sat in silence for 10 minutes. She cried quietly while I refilled my coffee and made her a cup of tea, chamomile, like when she was little and couldn't sleep. Mom, I swear I didn't know he was going to hurt you. I know, sweetheart. I reached across and touched her hand. Derek spent months convincing you I was losing my mind, didn't he? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. He showed me papers saying you'd been diagnosed with dementia. Said the doctors recommended family intervention before you gave your money away to strangers or forgot to pay bills. The manipulation had been surgical. Derek knew Emma worked part-time at a medical clinic, so fake medical documents would seem credible to her. He knew she loved me but lived 2 states away, so she couldn't see my daily routine. And he knew Emma had always been trusting, even as a child. He said you'd asked him to help manage your finances, Emma continued. Showed me papers with your signature authorizing him to access your accounts. Those signatures were real, I said. I signed them thinking they were insurance forms after your father died. Derek told me it was paperwork to add you as a beneficiary. Emma's face crumpled. He used my grief against both of us. Your grief, my loneliness, our trust. I squeezed her hand. He's very good at finding people's weak spots. She looked around the kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd eaten breakfast before school for 18 years. I helped him steal from you. You helped him because you thought you were protecting me. I kept my voice gentle. There's a difference between being tricked and being evil. What would you do if you discovered your spouse had manipulated you into betraying your own parent? Share your thoughts below. family manipulation is more common than people realize. But Mom, I signed those bank papers. I went to the probate court. I told them you'd been acting confused. Under false information. Jenny Martinez says that's legally called fraud by deception. Derek deceived you to get your cooperation. Emma wiped her eyes with the napkin I handed her. What happens to me now? Do I go to jail too? I'd been dreading this question for weeks. That depends on how much you help the prosecutors understand what Derek did. And whether you're willing to testify against him. The silence stretched between us again. Outside, I could hear Derek's car engine starting. He was probably calling his lawyer, or maybe booking a flight somewhere without extradition treaties. He'll say I was part of it, Emma whispered. That I knew everything. Then we'll prove you didn't. I pulled out another folder, this one with Emma's cell phone records, showing Derek had deleted most of their text conversations about my medical condition. Frank Morrison found the deleted messages. They showed Derek controlling what information you received about me. Emma looked at the phone records, her face hardening as she realized how thoroughly she'd been played. I want to help, she said finally. I want to testify. I want him to pay for what he did to both of us. I reached over and hugged my daughter for the first time in months. Then let's bury Derek with receipts. Derek lasted 6 more days as a free man. I know because Frank Morrison called me at 6:23 a.m. on Thursday morning with the news. They got him at the airport, Frank said. Miami International. Had a one-way ticket to Costa Rica and $43,000 in cash. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Our money? Probably. The serial numbers will tell us for sure, but Derek was carrying exactly the amount missing from your and Emma's joint checking account. Derek had made one final mistake, trying to run instead of lawyer up. If he'd stayed and played innocent, he might have delayed prosecution for months. But running with stolen cash made him look guilty of everything. The FBI arrested him on federal charges, Frank continued. Wire fraud, elder abuse, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. Attempted murder. Hearing those words made my hands shake. For weeks, I'd been thinking about financial fraud and legal procedures. But Derek hadn't just tried to steal my money, he'd tried to end my life. What about Emma? She's cooperating fully. Her testimony about Derek's lies regarding your medical condition will be crucial for the elder abuse charges. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd confronted them 3 weeks earlier. The house felt different now. Quieter. Safer. Like I could breathe again without looking over my shoulder. Emma called an hour later. Mom, they arrested Derek. I heard. How are you holding up? Scared, she admitted. But relieved. I kept thinking he'd come back and hurt both of us for exposing him. Derek had been unraveling since our kitchen confrontation. Emma told me he'd started drinking heavily, checking over his shoulder constantly, convinced the FBI was already watching him. The paranoia had probably pushed him to run earlier than planned. The prosecutor wants to meet with us next week, Emma said. They think Derek might have done this before, to other elderly women. That possibility had been haunting Frank Morrison for days. Men like Derek don't usually start with attempted murder. They practice on smaller victims first, learning how to manipulate families and forge documents. Have you ever wondered how many elderly people disappear each year under suspicious circumstances that get written off as accidents? The statistics might surprise you. Mom, I'm sorry doesn't cover what I need to say to you. Emma, you were a victim too. Derek spent months preparing you to believe I was losing my mind. By the time of the cruise, you probably would have agreed to anything he suggested. I should have trusted my instincts. Something felt wrong about that trip from the beginning. Trust them next time, I said. And remember, if someone's in a hurry for you to sign papers, slow down and ask questions. Derek was sitting in a Miami jail cell, probably realizing that all his careful planning had been undone by technology he didn't know existed and a woman he'd underestimated. Justice moves slowly, but it moves. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen chair where this all started, but everything has changed. Derek got 15 years in federal prison. The judge called it calculated elder abuse with extreme cruelty. Emma and I are rebuilding trust slowly. She moved back to Vermont last month, taking a job at the local medical clinic. We have coffee together every Tuesday morning, same time, same kitchen table. Some weeks we talk about Derek and the legal process. Other weeks we just catch up like normal people. The money came back, all of it. Derek's offshore accounts were seized, the insurance company canceled his fraudulent claim, and Vermont National restored my access to everything. Plus interest. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Derek's face when the judge read his sentence. For the first time since I'd known him, Derek had no plan, no manipulation, no way out. Just consequences. Frank Morrison retired last month, but he still sends me newspaper clippings about elder financial abuse cases. Your story is helping other families recognize the warning signs, he wrote in his last note. Jenny Martinez got promoted to partner at her law firm, partly because our case generated so much positive publicity for careful legal work. She calls me every few weeks to check in, and I always ask about her daughters. The Cuban fishermen who saved my life? I finally tracked them down through the State Department. Sent them each $1,000 and a letter in Spanish that my neighbor translated. They saved more than my life, they saved justice itself. Emma asked me last week if I regret trusting Derek in the beginning. Mom, you welcomed him into our family. Gave him access to everything. Aren't you angry at yourself for not seeing who he really was? I thought about that question for days. Derek was charming, helpful, seemed to genuinely care about our family's well-being. He played the perfect son-in-law for 3 years before showing his real intentions. I'm not angry at myself for being trusting, I told her. I'm proud of myself for being smart enough to survive and strong enough to fight back. If you've learned anything from Marla's story, what would it be? Share your biggest takeaway in the comments below. Your insight might help another family avoid what we went through. Derek thought he could erase me and steal my life's work. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift possible, absolute clarity about who deserves my trust and who doesn't. These days, I sleep peacefully in my own house, managing my own money, making my own decisions. Emma visits twice a week, and we're planning a cruise next summer, but this time, we're choosing the crew very carefully. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear when someone wants you gone. And keeping very detailed records.